determined that Israel's government's attack on journalists were deliberate and part of a wider pattern to silence journalists covering Israel's war crimes. Palestinian journalist Anan Osmar says journalists and media workers are being targeted in order to, quote, shut down the coverage, end of quote, of Israeli government's atrocities. Multiple investigations, as you all know, from Human Rights Watch to Reuters to Amnesty International, have all concluded an Israeli airstrike that killed a group of journalists on October 13th was indeed targeted and deliberate. The Israeli government's military admitted to deliberately killing Al Jazeera journalist Hamza Dodua in a targeted airstrike that also killed AFP's journalist Mustafa Zurafiya. Hamza was the oldest son of Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief, as you all know, Wael al-Dodua. A few months ago, Wael also lost 12 family members, including his wife. Has 15-year-old son, his 7-year-old daughter, and his infant grandson in Israeli airstrike. Again, we are not numbers. We are human beings. Tonight, we also hold space and honor. Tonight we also hold space and honor the life of Shireen Abu Akleh and continue to seek justice for her. Despite Netanyahu's ongoing genocidal campaign, Palestinian journalists have continued reporting from Gaza under extremely dangerous circumstances, y'all, to showing the world the truth about these atrocities. We call on the international community to please come together to investigate Israeli government's war crimes for its repeated attacks on journalists. Please join me in this moment of silence for all the journalists who have been killed in the past 3 months as we honor their lives. Please, everyone, a moment of silence.
Come over here. Come over here. Come on. I'm on a public ground. You are. Well, we're over here. Come on. Come on. I'm legally holding. Over here.
I'll let Hamza know. Thank you so much.
Woo, thank you.
Next up is Cori Bush. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I want to start by thanking Defending Rights and Dissent for organizing and for Freedom of the Press Foundation for co-sponsoring this vigil for us to remember, to honor, to mourn the lives of journalists killed by the Israeli government in Gaza. I also want to thank my sister in service, Rep. Tlaib, for your notable and courageous leadership in standing with humanity. We are here today because this needless, we're doing this together.
No, you gotta stay over there. One's gotta stay.
Needless, senseless, and merciless violence against Palestinians is the deadliest conflict in history for journalists. We are here today to mourn the over 100 journalists killed by the Israeli government. We also remember that those killed were more than just journalists, as we just heard Rep. Tlaib say. They were mothers and fathers, brothers, sisters, daughters, sons, friends, and loved ones. One story that stands out to me is that of Wael al-Dodua, the Gaza bureau chief for Al Jazeera. Since October 7th, Wael has lost more than 10 of his family members. First, his wife, daughter, son, grandson, and at least 8 other relatives were killed by Israeli airstrikes. And just last week, his son, Hamza al-Dodua, who was also a journalist and cameraman for Al Jazeera, was killed when an Israeli airstrike targeted his car. This horrific story of an entire family senselessly being killed is a painful reality, not just for journalists, but for so many of the Palestinians in the region. The role of a journalist, particularly in the face of conflict, is to capture the stories, the raw emotions, and the overlooked realities that often go unseen, unheard, untold. In other words, with their phones, with their pens, notepads, and cameras and recorders, they set out to uncover the truth. This role is significant when it comes to the journalists, particularly the Palestinian journalists, who set out to share the stories and perspectives of Palestinians. The significance of this lies in the reality that Palestinian voices are being intentionally silenced by the Israeli government and by our own government. This makes uncovering the truth of what's happening in Palestine not only difficult and dangerous, but essential. The Israeli government's silencing of and violence against journalists began long before October the 7th. In fact, for decades, as Palestinians have lived under their illegal occupation, the silencing of their voices and stories has been a tactic to maintain control and maintain support from the West. After all, it's much easier to ignore and cover up injustice if it goes untold. What we have seen since October 7th is the continuation of a pattern of systematic violence. The Committee to Protect Journalists found that before October 7th, Israeli soldiers had killed at least 20 journalists over 22 years, and none had ever been charged or held accountable. One of those journalists was the prominent, which we just heard, Palestinian-American Al Jazeera reporter Shireen Abu Akleh, who was killed by an Israeli soldier while wearing a press vest. I have long supported accountability for Shireen. In fact, in May of last year, I stood just over there at the Triangle and joined Congressman Andre Carson in reintroducing the Justice for Shireen Act. We still need justice for Shireen, and we also need justice for Hamza al-Dadu, for Somer Abu Daka, and every other journalist that has been killed by the Israeli government. I would also like to call out the silence by the press in this country and most of the West, as their very own peers are being slaughtered for doing the very jobs they do. Why it is that so many had the I'm trying to figure out why it is that so many had the courage to speak out about the killing of Jamal Khashoggi and the arbitrary detention of Evan Gershkovich. But few have anything to say as dozens and dozens of journalists are killed in Gaza. Why do we yet again see a red line in our solidarity and humanity when the journalists are Palestinian? If democracy truly dies in darkness, what does that say about the collective silence about these mass atrocities? So let me be clear as I possibly can. If you actually believe in freedom of the press, your solidarity cannot be conditional. Intentionally or indiscriminately targeting journalists, it is a war crime. Just like the targeting of all civilians is a war crime. Just like the targeting of medical facilities is a war crime. Just like the forced starvation and the withholding of water and electricity is a war crime. Just like the collective punishment of 2.3 million people is a war crime. This needs to stop. Stop the war crimes. Stop our government's complicity. Stop the violence against journalists and against all civilians. We demand accountability and a ceasefire now.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Bush, for that incredibly powerful speech. And thank you, Representative Tlaib as well, for those powerful remarks. Our next speaker is my colleague in the press freedom world, Caitlin Vogus. Caitlin is Deputy Director of Freedom of the Press Foundation, the organization co-sponsoring this event with Defending Rights and Dissent. And I just want to say, a lot of controversial press freedom issues where a lot of people should be speaking out, it's oftentimes just DRAD and Freedom of the Press Foundation out here. No shade on our other colleagues, but again and again, I know FBF stands with us in some of the most controversial but most important press freedom issues of our times.
Thanks, Chip, and thank you so much for organizing tonight's vigil. Thank you to the representatives for their remarks as well. We're here, of course, tonight to mourn the journalists who have been killed in Gaza, but we're also here to demand that our government act to protect journalists who are bravely and heroically covering the war in Gaza. Protecting journalists matters not only because all civilian life should be protected during wartime. It matters because protecting journalists also protects the world's right to know about what's happening in Gaza. The Biden administration has said that it doesn't want to see journalists being killed. And if that's true, then it needs to use its influence with Israel to demand that journalists in Gaza can safely document the war. The U.S. must demand that Israel renounce the indiscriminate and deliberate killing of journalists. It must demand that Israel promptly and thoroughly investigate attacks on journalists. And if it finds that particular individuals or entities are responsible, those people must be held accountable. The U.S. must demand that Israel allow international journalists to enter Gaza, independent of the Israeli military, so that they too can witness and report about the war from the ground. Because the American public and the world's ability to know what happens there depends on access by journalists. Too many journalists have already been killed, and too many have been shut out of Gaza. The whole world is watching Gaza right now, but that's because we have journalists who are our eyes and our ears and can tell us what's happening. If the Biden administration cares about press freedom, it must protect it now in Gaza, and it should start with protecting journalists' lives. Thanks.
Yay, that's right.
Thank you so much. And our final speaker is Townsend Cock. He is a freelance journalist who has worked to connect reporters across the country with humanitarian and Palestinian community organizations. He has done a tremendous behind-the-scenes job making sure the American media has access and reports on Palestinian voices. I'm so honored that he's here tonight with us.
Hi, I'm Townsend Cock. I'm a freelance writer, and I've spent the past 3 months connecting reporters across the country with sources on the ground in Gaza and with Palestinian community organizations in the U.S. The killing of so many journalists in Gaza is an outrage, and the U.S. government must do more to demand their protection. I'm grateful to Defending Rights and Dissent for organizing this, and also to Reps Tlaib and Bush for being so courageous on this and so many other things. Shireen Abu Akleh once observed after a 2-month visit to the U.S. that, quote, you never see a human story about Gaza in the West. Shireen worked her whole life to tell the human stories of Palestinians and became a household name in the Arab world. As we all know, Shireen was killed by Israeli forces in 2022. And now in Gaza, we see the same thing playing out over and over again right before our eyes. Gaza's storytellers, the people who give the world a sense of the rich humanity of this relentlessly demonized population, are being taken away from us. Many journalists in the U.S. are probably thinking, what can I do? So I want to address my remarks to them, to the journalists who might be watching this. You have a role to play, and I want to tell you that this goes well beyond loudly calling in your unions and in your professional organizations for protection of journalists in Gaza. If we really admire these colleagues, if we really want to honor their sacrifice and their heroism, what we need to do is try to tell the humanity of Palestinians in our reporting and fill the void that they left behind. We need to tell the stories of Palestinians to the U.S. audience. You'll be surprised at just how easy it is to get in touch with Palestinian community organizations across the country who can connect you with sources. The Palestinian American Community Center in New Jersey is a great resource, and I've put in touch several journalists who have reported great stories from them. Humanitarian sources are also important. A group called Gaza Medic Voices has dozens. A group called Gaza Medic Voices has dozens of members on the ground in Gaza right now who are pleading to the world to tell their stories. I can connect you to them and to other sources if you contact me. There have been great examples of humane reporting from the major media, but I want to highlight 3 lesser known but really remarkable examples to underscore that we all have a role to play. Kylie Chung of Jezebel has reported for months on the suffering of pregnant women in Gaza who have seen a 300% increase in miscarriages and who are undergoing C-sections without anesthesia. Hanan Adeli of the Bergen Record in New Jersey has done some amazing work on the pain and the grief that Palestinian Americans right in our backyard have felt about this war. And it goes to show that reporters can take an interest, whether you're a local reporter or someone interested in women's issues. Everyone can tell a story. Lastly, there's Layla El Haddad, whose book on motherhood in Gaza is a moving reminder that Palestinians have exactly the same hopes and dreams as the rest of us. When I watch things like last night's Senate vote and begin, frankly, to lose faith in humanity, I remember these people's journalism, and I think to myself, if only local papers across the country were plastered with the human stories of Palestinians in Gaza. I think how different things would be if Americans had great journalism about Palestine and realized that wow, these people could easily be my brothers and sisters. That could be my daughter over there in Gaza. Good reporting allows us to realize that Palestinians deserve a peaceful and dignified life, just like the rest of us. That's the power of great journalism, and that's the mission that the people who we're honoring tonight dedicated their lives to. We are honoring them not just to demand their protection now, but also to honor their sacrifices by telling the human story of Palestinians ourselves. I firmly believe that every journalist watching this can play a role in that. Thank you, and please get in touch with me through our press release so we can tell the story to Palestinians. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So that concludes tonight's vigil. I want to thank everyone for being out here. I want to thank Freedom of the Press Foundation for once again standing with us in the cold this time. Perhaps next time better weather. And I just want to say that Defending Rights and Dissent is a domestic political expression organization. We generally do not weigh in on international conflicts, but when our government is so complicit in the targeted killing of Israeli journalists, we cannot say we support Palestinian journalists, Israel's targeted killing of Palestinian journalists. We cannot say we support the First Amendment, we support press freedom, we support political expression, and say silence on this issue. We were happy to organize this vigil tonight. We're just getting started in calling our government to account for its complicity in these war crimes against Palestinian journalists. So please follow us on the web at rightsanddissent.org. Please follow up with Townsend. And if anyone has any questions, visit Caitlin's Scripps website as well.
Freedom.press.
That's a great URL. I don't know how you got that. Freedom.press. And if anyone has any questions, I'm going to stick around for a little bit, not too much longer, because it is cold out here. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good to see you. Good to see you again. Good to see you again. Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry.
Real quick.
Yes.
Maybe with the light kind of behind me rather than like that was making a weird two-faced.
Risk it and take my coat off and just do my suit?
Freeze, but it's up to you.
I'm gonna do it. Yeah. Give me a minute.
Hope you don't mind. Yeah. Just, yeah. Whatever.
You drive as Shireen Ablaka once said, never seen the story.
You want to give me a ride over? I noticed, that happened near simultaneous.
So we didn't know that. We had no knowledge of that. We did not know that. This was not in conflict with that. Okay. I'm not sure what that was. But we respect all points of view, and we were not. No.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification.
The members of Congress weren't aware of that either. Who spoke with us either? We came out. So I just want to clarify, this was not meant to be in competition with another event.
Fair enough. Well, I did, because of that, though, I did kind of miss your remarks at the beginning, and I guess specifically what I wanted to ask is, like, what is your call on the Biden administration specifically? Like, what would you want Biden to do to protect journalists' rights?
So I can give you my call, but instead I'm going to tell you what the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate, the union that represents journalists in the occupied territories, has called for. They have called in court for the Biden administration to be enjoined from providing any further weapons, funds, or diplomatic support to the state of Israel. That is what the union who represents every Palestinian journalist in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza is calling for. And I think if people in the West want to think about how they can support them, they should think about what they're actually demanding. We would like to see the Biden administration invoke the laws prohibiting military transfers that are used human rights abuses to Israel so long as they are continuing to kill journalists. Obviously, there are other human rights abuses, so maybe that wouldn't, resume the aid, just ceasing killing journalists. But as a press freedom organization, we want to be clear, we cannot arm another country's slaughter of journalists.
I've seen the State Department, for example, celebrate World Press Freedom Day and that sort of thing. Like, do you think that their lack of action on this issue has kind of hurt the credibility of the State Department?
The State Department has zero credibility on World Press Freedom, which is interesting because they have made press freedom sort of one of their things they're interested in when looking at governments that have terrible press freedom records that we don't have good relations with. And I'm not saying that these governments are press freedom havens. The State Department might be right about them. They have made press freedom into a cudgel while ignoring the fact that the most prominent political prisoner in the world today, Julian Assange, is jailed at the U.S.'s request. You have multiple heads of state before the UN General Assembly calling for his freedom. And now we are funding and killing even more deaths of journalists. Obviously, the killing of journalists by Israel did not start with October the 7th. It was well before then, and we were arming them. But the unprecedented killing of one journalist a day makes the State Department position all the more laughable, hypocritical, sickening. I don't know if you want to be laughing or sickened by what Blinken is doing. Probably both, you know.
Do you have anything else?
Yeah. Do you think Israel is purposely, Israel with the help of the U.S., are purposely targeting journalists?
Absolutely.
To prevent the full truth from coming out to the rest of the world?
100%. I can't say in every single case of a journalist's death it has been targeted, but again and again we've seen investigations by Western media, by human rights NGOs, by other parties reveal in specific cases journalists were specifically targeted. So there is zero question that in at least some of these cases, Israel targeted them and killed them. Is that true in all 109 cases? I can't say. I know the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate points out that in 96 of them, they were killed in targeted strikes. Other human rights groups have put the number much, much lower than that, but in at least some of the cases, they are targeting these journalists, and I absolutely think it is because they do not want people to see what's coming out of Gaza. Hence, you have Biden administration officials being concerned that if we have a temporary ceasefire, Western journalists will report what's happening and will lose support for the war.
Yes, Representative.
Can I get your name again?
Chip Gibbons. I'm the Policy Director of Defending Rights and Dissent, an organization that defends the American public's right to know and freedom to act.
Thank you very much, Chip.
Thank you.
Double standard corporate media in the U.S. You know, they you know, if some white American journalist died in Gaza, there's going to be an uproar everywhere, right? But you know, when it turns about Palestinian journalists,
No, I
kind of thing kind of escalated, but
I think that every journalist.
Yeah. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know.
I felt this way about a song for years.
So,
where it's like,
right now, just kind of explain, introduce yourself and tell us.
So I'm Townsend Koch. I'm a freelance reporter, and I spent the last 3 months connecting reporters interested in Palestine and reporting on Gaza to sources on the ground and also in the U.S. And tonight I was really happy to participate in this because we of course need to speak out and demand that the U.S. government do more to protect journalists in Gaza and also allow international journalists into the Gaza Strip. But something that's overlooked is that journalists in the West also can play a bigger role than they think in telling the story of Palestine and the humanity of these people who are demonized too much. And like these reporters in Gaza who are being killed, they spent their whole lives and they paid the ultimate price to tell the story of their people. And I feel like what better tribute to them than to fill the void and report on Palestine in a better way ourselves as Western journalists. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, would you say that Israel, along with the help of the U.S., are purposely targeting these journalists because they don't want the full truth getting out?
Well, like Chip said a second ago, the co-organizer, in a lot of these cases we're not sure, but it's hard to not think that from the sheer number who are being killed. It's hard not to think that there's a deliberate attempt to prevent journalists from reporting on the truth in Gaza. Yeah.
Kind of frivolous material, fashion statements, or whatever. It seems like there's a lot of distraction away.
How does Biden and top journalists push the importance of protecting the press while simultaneously paying for the bombs that Israel is using to kill journalists in Gaza?
Hypocrisy has been a theme of the last 3 months. I don't think I need to tell anyone that. And when Biden and Blinken come out and talk about how the U.S. is a champion of press freedom around the world, I mean, how do Palestinians certainly don't take it seriously. Arabs around the world don't take it seriously, and increasingly, I think. American journalists are starting to not take it seriously either, because they can see that the U.S. government is doing nothing about the killing of their colleagues in a war that the U.S. supports, and the hypocrisy is just stunning, and we need to call that out as reporters. Yeah. Thank you.
That's what's really going on. That's the real answer. And these congressmen and senators need to be confronted right in their own hearings, because that's blood money. And President Biden's already gotten $4 million from AIPAC. And they're all expecting the money to go up for their campaigns. There's only 3 or 4 senators have had the decency to stand up for a ceasefire. The rest of them are for sale. And those children are all dead for those senators' careers and those congressmen who are not like Cori Bush or AOC or Rashida Tlaib. You know, they're only a minority of Congress people. At least there are more of them than the senators standing up for the ceasefire. It's all about that AIPAC money, all about the military-industrial complex, I have no idea, and all about the evangelist money that's coming in because they think that the apocalypse started in Jerusalem, so they want a real blowout world war. And that's true. It sounds hard to believe, but it's actually true. And it's all this money going into Congress and the Senate to run those campaigns, that those children are dead right now.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hi. The organizer. Oh, do you want to talk to the Vigil organizer? Oh, it's fine.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, why not? Jeez.
Sure. I'll be brief because I'm very cold.
All right, guys. So this was a vigil for the journalists who have been killed in Gaza. We are at, as Chip said, 109 journalists that have been killed in the past 3 months. So it was a short vigil, but they're gonna be doing more stuff as this goes on. But I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you were able to share this stream. We will probably post some clips later because we had trouble finding at the exact location of where this vigil was going to be held. So I recorded some while we had some tech issues, but in the meantime, I want to remind you guys, subscribe to this channel so you will get notifications for when I do go live. I probably covered about anywhere from 15 to 20 protests in New York City and Washington D.C. And so if you subscribe to this channel, you'll get the notification for when I do go live almost every other day. Some news Jordan wanted me to share with you guys that, let me see. Alright, so tomorrow morning there's going to be a big story coming out about the Flint water crisis. Make sure you're following Status Coup on Twitter, YouTube. Follow Jordan Sheridan on Twitter and the Status Coup Substack. So again, that's a big story coming out tomorrow about the Flint water. Yeah, it's okay. The Flint water crisis. So make sure you look out for that tomorrow. Again, follow Status Coup on Twitter, Jordan Sheridan on Twitter. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Status Coup. If you are able to become a member of Status Coup, we rely on our members in order to be able to do this work. So, go to statuscoup.com/join, sign up for $5 to $10 a month to help us continue this work. And that's going to be it for tonight. It's cold out today, so that's why it was a quick vigil. Okay. Let me just check to make sure that I got everything. It was kind of hectic getting out here. I took a bus this morning to get out here and almost didn't make it because the bus was running late. All right. All right, guys, so I think that's it for tonight. Again, big story coming out tomorrow on Flint. Make sure you look out for that. All right. And I will be back in New York City. Maybe possibly covering something on Friday. We'll see what happens. But will, like I said, subscribe to Status Coup, this channel, and you'll get the notification. All right, everyone. Have a good night.